Are you tired of having to spend your hard-earned mana on silly creatures only to have them die to removal a turn or two later? Has your recent attack step got you down? Then look no further. In this newly minted EDH deck tech, you'll find nothing but enchantments, artifacts, planeswalkers, and more. If you think Animar's a joke, then this just might be the list for you. This is Oloro, Ageless Ascetic. For 3 colorless, 1 white, 1 blue, and 1 black, we get a 4 power, 5 toughness, giant warrior as a commander with 3 incredibly strong triggered abilities. Oloro's first ability triggers on our upkeep, giving us 2 life for each of our upkeeps when he's on the field. Synergistically, Oloro's second ability triggers whenever you gain life. For each time we gain life, not for how much life we gain, we are able to pay 1 colorless mana to draw a card and cause 1 point of damage to each of our opponents. Lastly, Oloro's final ability is a carbon copy of his first, with the life gain trigger occurring at our upkeep, only in this instance it can trigger from the command zone. If you've ever played against an Oloro deck, you'll know that his upkeep trigger is no joke. In fact, it's such a strong trigger that the Dual Commanders Committee banned him shortly after his printing. Their reason? His trigger was so strong that it allowed builders to forego on a lot of removal in favor for tutors and combo pieces, since the added life would give you a significant safety net. So yeah, strong color combination plus strong triggered ability plus built-in potential draw, that sounds to me like you've got yourself a winning commander right there. Most of the lists that I've seen are pretty much your typical Esper Good Stuff decks with Oloro at the helm just because of his life gain. This is fine if you enjoy that type of deck, but I'm a firm believer in making a theme for a deck for EDH. For today's deck list, I'm going to be discussing, and I'll post a link to it later on, a list I saw online a while back which was aptly named Creatureless Oloro. It plays out like a control or combo deck, but without being bogged down by having to run all those value ETB creatures. Now let's dig in. Now, most of our early game will consist of ramp. In all honesty, since we're running no creatures, we want to load up on as many mana rocks as we can. These can be useful later on, and besides that, a lot of the more interesting cards we'll be running in our deck cost a lot of mana. You can safely run all if not most of the signets and talismans with little to no downside. Some of my favorite early cards to drop in this deck are meant to punish multiple archetypes while having no effect on us. Casting a turn 2 Overburden is going to significantly slow down any aggro or creature based ramp decks, as well as potentially punish any early reanimation decks. Blind Obedience and its more costly sister Frozen Aether do a great job of slowing down opponents as well as tapping various permanent types as they enter the battlefield. I'm a huge fan of casting Obedience early since it allows us to gain even more of a life padding by using our extra mana to drain opponents. Don't be afraid to board wipe early. An early Wrath of God or Day of Judgment can really disrupt any creature-based combo decks like Elves or Goblins. You'll most likely be running multiple board wipes anyway, so busting one out early won't be a real issue. One of the most fun and interesting combos that I've seen for the deck comes when you combine an early Web of Inertia and Rest in Peace. Not only will Rest in Peace deal with their graveyards, it will essentially lock all of your opponents out of a combat step if they choose to attack only you. Mid-game is where we start to get really mean. If you thought exiling an opponent's graveyard or tapping their permanents wasn't nice, well, I'm not sure what to tell you other than to stop watching this video. Since we won't be running any creatures in our decks, we can safely drop an enchantment like Tainted Aether or Spreading Plague to wreak havoc on our opponent's creature base. Let me tell you, there's nothing that stops a token deck faster than dropping one of these early on. You can also consider running Aurification if you're looking for a few laughs. This one enchantment won't stop an initial attack, but it'll certainly make it so that you won't be getting attacked again by those creatures ever. Also, just as I said during your early turns, don't be afraid to drop a board wipe or two. So because our deck doesn't win through a traditional method of attacking people to death, we have a great deal of freedom when it comes to how we want to win with our deck. To stay on theme, I've always thought that Test of Endurance is an appropriate win condition for any deck that has a decent life gain strategy. If you want to get more complex, there's always the Exquisite Blood and Sanguine Bond combo. The pair of enchantments will trigger off of one of our life gain triggers, and create a loop that will continue to occur until one of our opponents is dead, but then stop. Therefore, the more ways you have to gain life, the more people you can kill per turn. Depending on your build, you might be running a few Planeswalkers in your deck, which can help gain you some advantage, but they can also double as a win condition in your deck. One such example can be found if you're running Teferi Temporal Archmage. When coupled with the Chain Veil, several mana rocks, and a few other Planeswalkers, Teferi can allow us to have infinite Planeswalker triggers, which we can easily use to grind out even the most stuck-in of opponents. Lastly, another thematically on-point pair of spells that can often win us the game are Exsanguinate and Debt to the Deathless. There is something just so satisfying about draining an opponent to death in an Oloro deck. Now let's check out some of my suggested cards to round out the deck. Well of Lost Dreams is a decent card engine in our deck, which becomes even better if you're running mana rocks like Pristine Talisman. Limdol's Vault is a powerful Dimir card that has a downside which is easily negated by Oloro. Instant speed deck manipulation is few and far between, and most decks that run blue and black run this even with the life loss. Oloro, and to a lesser extent Karla of the Ghost Council, are probably the only two decks that would ever consider running Chalice of Life, and not get laughed at for it. When it flips, being able to blast an opponent in the face for 5 isn't something to ignore. Serra's Sanctum is a land you'll strongly want to consider if your deck ends up going with a heavy enchantment theme. Esper traditionally isn't the fastest color pairing, but this land can help accelerate us into those later, meaner enchantments that can help us close out a game. Speaking of lands, Boseiju Who Shelters is another important land for our deck. We want to make sure that our spells hit, and what better way to guarantee it than by paying a little life? So, remember early on when I mentioned in early and late game sections that Artifact and Planeswalkers can help us win the game? Look no further than Tezzeret the Seeker and Tezzeret Agent of Bolas. Whether it's making our artifacts into creatures or tutoring them to our hand or to the field, these two cards can generate significant value for our deck. If left unchecked, they can often steal us a win from unsuspecting opponents. If you're looking to make it even more mean, you should consider adding in Sorin Markov or Manchester Sphinx for more Life Matters cards. As always, thank you for watching, and be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to see more videos.